Okay. So as I said before, my name is Gabriel Gasque. I am head of outreach at protocols.io. And before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I have a PhD in experimental neuroscience and did my postdoc in neurogenetics. And before joining protocols.io to promote the practice of open and reproducible methods, I was an editor in the open access journal PLOS Biology for about a decade. I've been with protocols.io for about 2 years. I would also like to acknowledge that our main office, protocols.io main office, is located in Berkeley, California, the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone people. And we recognize that we have benefited from the use and occupation of this land. Consistent with our values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge this fact. We also recognize that the Ohlone people are alive and are flourishing members of Berkeley and the broader California Bay Area communities today. And before we actually get into the core of the presentation, I would like to share some housekeeping information with you. As mentioned before, I am recording the presentation and will share the recording and the slide deck with all registered participants. Also, closed captioning has been enabled, so feel free to turn it on if you want. I will speak for about 40 to 45 minutes, leaving at the end some time for questions, but you can start typing them at any moment in the chat or in the Q&A windows of Zoom. And finally, the focus of this presentation, it's about the incentives for sharing experimental methods in protocols.io or in any other outlet or repository. If you want to learn more about how to use the platform itself or advanced features of the platform, you can visit protocols.io/webinars, where we host monthly webinars, both introductory as well as advanced. And at any time, you can request a one-to-one demo at protocols.io/help/demo. So now, with the housekeeping out of the way, we can start with today's agenda, which you should be able to see on the screen right now. So we will talk a little bit about the history of reporting methods and of method development and optimization not getting the recognition as worthy of standalone publication and not getting the credit that it deserves. But that started to change about 20 years ago as methods started being recognized as an important modular output of research. So we will cover the different ways of sharing and getting credit by using protocols.io to share your detailed research methods. So for point number 1, let's go a little bit back in history. The journal Nature Methods was actually started only in 2004. And the excerpt that you see at the bottom of this slide, it's from the inaugural editorial, in which the founding editor said that their goal was to create a highly visible forum for the presentation of novel methods, because major methodological developments take their root in the cross-fertilization across disciplines. By contrast, the method sections of specialized journals, although extremely useful for the targeted peer groups, do not grant technical information the wide exposure conducive to interdisciplinary exchanges. And we will touch on this a little more later on. But behind the scenes, what we learned from the founding editor-in-chief of Nature Methods, Veronique Kiermer, who later became the chief scientific officer at the Public Library of Science, is that even in the Nature publishing group, there was a lot of skepticism, around launching this journal, Nature Methods, because they said that nature publishes research and that nobody was going to read just methods, and that this could dilute the nature brand, and that it will be impossible to fill a journal's pages with just methodological information, and so on. However, as we all know, the journal Nature Methods has been a huge success. But it is interesting to think about the skepticism of giving methods independent credit as recently as 20 years ago. But now, if we look more recently, within the last 10 years or so, there are now a lot of journals focusing on and publishing protocols and methods. I show you some examples in these slides, and I don't think that this list is exhaustive. Big publishers like Springer Nature keep expanding their portfolio of methods-centered journals, like Nature Protocols 2 years after they launched Nature Methods, and then BMC Methods now. They also recently acquired us, Protocols.io, so we are now part of the Springer Nature family. Another big publisher, Elsevier, has launched Star Protocols and Methods X. And there are some other independent initiatives like Jove, Bioprotocols, and some others. It seems, therefore, that many journals, funders, and researchers have started to realize it is not just code and data that we should be sharing. In that sense, you might recall that it was in the late 90s when we started to move away from please contact authors for code and data to use specialized data and code repositories like GitHub, Dryad, Figshare, and Open Science Framework. And although methods have been playing just catch up, sharing them independently of the publications have become the norm. And we have now more choices on where and on how to communicate our detailed research methods. Okay, that's enough about the changes that we have seen in recent times. I will go on now to talk about public sharing and getting credit for reproducible and discoverable methods. And specifically about Protocols.io, we will go through first how most people share their methods in Protocols.io, which is actually independently of papers. Then we will talk about partnerships that we have with specific journals, plus one, BMC methods, and Nature protocols to get your protocols peer-reviewed and published as a formal peer-reviewed manuscript, as well as the many partnerships and connections that we have with many other journals, which aim to make your papers, your research papers, more rigorous and more reproducible by providing detailed research methods. So, when we see how scientists, researchers communicate their work and their discoveries to their colleagues and to the world more broadly, we have started to see a more modular approach of science communication. So, at the center of this cartoon, we have the most recognized research output, which is the peer-reviewed publication, the paper. This is the bread and butter, the currency that you put on your CVs and that funders and employers will be looking at when evaluating productivity. But we now appreciate more the value of other independent but interrelated modules of research output, like code and data, and we have created specific repositories for these, which I mentioned before: Open Science Framework, Zenodo, Dryad, GitHub. Methods are another module of research output. And in fact, I would say that methods are really the linchpin to reuse. And the ongoing value of all the other outputs here hinges on having the methods. because I venture to claim it is really difficult, if not impossible, to understand the meaning of the data and any interpretation of the data if we do not understand the details of how these results, the data, were acquired. And this is where protocols.io comes in, because protocols.io is an online open access repository and a platform for authors to create, share, and publish detailed, dynamic, interactive, and versionable protocols before, during, and after publication of a research article. And I would need to clarify here that what we understand as publication of a protocol in protocols.io is similar to preprinting an article in bioRxiv, for example. We are a repository for methods, not a peer-reviewed journal. For journals, publication is different because for them, it is the result of a peer review process. However, as we will discuss later on, protocols posted in protocols.io are citable and can be part of a peer-reviewed publication, or they can even be peer-reviewed as a standalone methodological articles. So if you are not familiar with protocols.io at all, please take a look at the URL at the bottom of this slide. This link will take you to the welcome page, which is a great place to start familiarizing yourself with the platform. And as I said before, one of the features of protocols.io is the open access repository, in which there are now over 18,000 published protocols. And these are all published under a CC BY license, an open access CC BY license, making these protocols completely free to read, use, and reuse. In this open access platform, it is also free to create an account and to publish an unlimited number of protocols. But there are also over 63,000 private protocols, which have been created by users who are developing, optimizing, and perhaps just sharing their protocols with their immediate colleagues. And this is the business model of protocols.io, as we charge institutions for these private collaborative workspaces. And many universities, funders, and consortia use such licenses. The free accounts have only a limited number of private files. So if you make your protocols and publish them right away, the free account can work for anyone. But we charge users to take advantage of unlimited private space that allow extensive collaborations. And something that I would like to point out is that last year alone, more than 2 million, almost 2.5 million readers came to the open access repository to read the public protocols. And as I said before, most of these protocols are not linked to any specific peer-reviewed article. They are just simply sitting in protocols.io. And we will talk about people's motivations to share independently of a paper. But what I want to point out is that despite this independent sharing, there is a lot of traffic to the protocols. About 60% of all traffic to the public protocols comes directly from Google searches, from people typing in Google, PCR, single cell, which means that they are organically finding these protocols. And geographically speaking, when we look at our own analytics, we see that only about 30% of the traffic to the protocols comes from the United States. And the rest is from all over the world, which means that there is a really global reach once you publish the protocols in the open access repository. And when you come to protocols.io, you can also search directly if you want to look for specific protocols that might be useful for your research. These protocols can be run directly in the computer or tablet, or you can create your own forks or editable copies, which then you can tweak to make these protocols work for you, depending on a different equipment or a different cell type, bacterial strain, or mouse line. And this reuse of public protocols might save you a lot of time and energy, as you will have all the comprehensive details of this approach, the previous published approach, right away. Protocols.io also has some open, searchable communities, which are set up as workspaces. So if you use protocols.io, you will very likely have your own private workspaces. But some of these workspaces are open for all to join. So you can search for workspaces that represent communities that may be relevant to your research, and you can join those if you want to have a faster view of what people are working on in that space and the ability to interact and engage with those researchers who also are members of the different groups. And before we continue, let me show you how the protocols created and published in protocols.io go beyond what a traditional static PDF offers. These protocols are live, dynamic, and interactive, yet persistent and citable documents. So I'm going to be opening one of those protocols in the platform. Because this protocol has been published, it has received a DOI, making it both permanent, persistent, and citable. The protocols themselves are written in a step-by-step recipe-like fashion, can be supplemented with pictures, images, and even videos that you can play while you run your protocol. Different sections of the protocol can be coded in different colors, creating a table of content that I can navigate. The protocols are interactive documents because any reader, this being a public protocol, can come and post a comment or ask a question, and the authors of the protocol will be notified. The protocols are also versionable, and in this case, the authors have created 3 versions of the protocol, and I asked the platform to compare 2 versions side by side so I can see the optimization and evolution of the protocol. Any reader, as I mentioned before, can create their own editable copy, so all the information will be transferred to your own private folder, so you can optimize the protocol and change whatever you need to change to make it work for you. And finally, because this is a wet lab protocol, I can run it directly from the computer and tablet. I can mark each step as done as I make progress in the protocol. If I notice something unusual or I make a mistake, I can add a comment to my protocol. And then eventually, when I finish running my protocol, I can save a run with a timestamp as an independent file, which then I can revisit, see what I changed, what went wrong, and keep optimizing my protocol. Or I can even use this as an electronic lab book, keeping record of my experiments. But let me go back to my presentation. Now that you've seen how the protocols look like, let's talk about the rewards that come with creating and publishing these detailed protocols. So not necessarily in order of importance, but a first reward for making your methods public is that, going back to the concept of modular communication of research outputs, by using a specialized repository like protocols.io for publishing your methods, you are increasing their discoverability and potential reuse, which should lead to increased credit and recognition. So let me use an example here taken from X, previously known as Twitter. So you can see a tweet here from a researcher who was looking for a protocol for RNA extraction from primary cortical neurons in culture. Someone responded to this tweet and recommended a protocol that is in protocol.io. Now, interestingly, this protocol was part of a paper that was published in the journal GigaScience. But the paper was about a fish parasite. So the chances of researchers working on primary cortical neurons in culture finding a paper on a fish parasite as a means of finding a method that will work for them seemed really slim. But because the protocol was published independently in a specialized repository, it made the method more discoverable and increased the chances of people reusing it. And once a protocol is published in the platform, there is a tab in the document called metrics that follows live in real time the number of views, bookmarks, export, copies, comments, and citations that the protocol receives. And an obvious second reward for publishing detailed methods is the increase in reproducibility, not only in the field, but also internally, in the work that you do in your own research group. If you are not familiar with this, let me introduce to you the Cancer Biology Reproducibility Project, which was a $1.5 million initiative coordinated by the Center for Open Science and by Science Exchange with the goal of trying to independently replicate almost 200 experiments from about 50 high-profile papers on cancer biology. What the Reproducibility Project researchers discovered very soon after the project began is that it is very difficult to replicate previously published work. There are several reasons why this is the case, but one of them is that the original researchers, the ones who published these 193 experiments, didn't document in their articles with enough details what they did and how they did it. So, out of these 193 experiments, 0% of the protocols, 0% were described with enough detail for the reproducibility researchers to repeat them without contacting the original authors. But equally striking, when the reproducibility project contacted the original researchers, they also discovered that the original researchers didn't always could tell how exactly their own experiments had been done. Therefore, the problem of lack of reproducibility goes beyond the lack of adequate reporting in published articles, but also highlights deficiencies in the way researchers keep record of their own experimental protocols for housekeeping. And that brings me to a third reason to make your detailed research methods public, which is to guarantee preservation. As we all know, a large fraction of a lab personnel is floating. So students graduate and leave, postdoctoral researchers become faculty elsewhere, and so on. Publishing your methods makes them persistent, citable objects that will be permanently stored in your workspace as well as in the open access repository. And I should mention that all private and public content in protocols.io is mirrored and backed up in Clocks, the Internet Archive, and GitHub. And modular sharing or methods also increases the chances of establishing collaborations, because we have seen cases where researchers report that this is the case. And one important thing that I would like to note is that since we started publishing protocols in 2014, and now with these more than 18,000 published protocols, we have never ever seen a case of a publisher saying that because you share your protocols in protocols.io, you cannot publish your research or method paper in their journals. Publishers do not consider publishing in protocols.io prior publication. So, just like sharing preprints in bioRxiv, sharing in protocols.io is like preprinting methods. So we have never seen a case of that hurting authors. And we encourage people to share publicly whenever the protocols are ready. So from the publishing perspective, sharing protocols in protocols.io should give your methods visibility. Let you engage with the people who are using your method. Make it a central place where you can iterate and share correction and optimization easily and guide everyone naturally to those new versions. And none of this precludes further recognition by publishing the protocol later as part of a peer-reviewed publication. And that takes me to the fact that publishing your protocols should also simplify your work down the road when the time of submitting and publishing a paper comes. Let me use here another example from X. So we have Professor Jonathan Kipnis at the Washington University in St. Louis saying, what if labs publish each of their unique methods, protocols, and in future papers, instead of rewriting the protocols, we just cite them? We waste so much time on methods by saying the same thing differently. And I would add, just generally vaguely. But this is exactly what protocols.io is about. You can publish your detailed protocols in the open access repository, obtain a DOI, so you and your colleagues can cite this protocol in there and in your papers respectively, so there is no need to write the methods section again. And this is what the authors of this PLOS Biology paper did. They created, posted, and published their protocols in protocols.io, obtaining a citable DOI, which they included in the materials and methods section of their paper, replacing most of the writing. Now the reader, by following the link, has access to the detailed step-by-step protocol in protocols.io. And a really nice thing about how protocols.io works is that the protocols are versionable. So if the authors have updated their protocol since the time of publication of the paper, the reader will be notified. And they can choose to read the protocol as it was published together with the paper, which is what you see on the screen right now, or by following the View the Newer Version link, have access to the most updated version of the protocol. And that brings me to the fact that because there is a push for reproducibility, there are now over 500 scientific journals, some open access, some subscription journals, that encourage authors in their submission guidelines to include in their manuscript a link to detailed protocols in protocols.io. And this also applies to many funders, now encouraging or requiring detailed method sharing. And remember that I said before that we have never had an issue with authors not being able to publish a paper for publishing previously in protocols.io. In fact, not only do journals not see a conflict with publishing your protocols, they often actively encourage the use of the platform and repository. And a sixth point will be that by managing, preserving, and archiving your protocols in protocols.io, you will be compliant with mandates by funding agencies and universities regarding managing and sharing methods and data. In the United States, for example, the NIH data management and sharing policy requires that all applicants to include a data management and sharing statement in their grant applications. And the NIH's rigor, and reproducibility guidelines explicitly highlight the need for grant applicants to describe details in their application, which should be considered by the reviewers. And we have to keep in mind that methods are an integral part of data. So we need to provide those details. And before we move on to the next section, I would like to show you how easy it is to publish our protocol in protocols.io. So I will be opening my own account in protocols.io. Just to orient ourselves, to the left, where I'm scrolling, you see the multiple workspaces to which I belong. Each workspace comes with a file manager that hosts and organizes different folders and protocols, but we're going to be working from my own private workspace. But what I want to show is how easy it is to publish. By highlighting the protocol, I have a menu. I just select publish, which, let me see. I select publish, and I just have to complete 6 steps to make the protocol public and to assign to it a DOI. We don't peer review the protocol, but we do a scan for spam. So once we do a scan that takes us less than 24 hours, your protocol will be immediately public. It's very easy. Let me go back to my presentation. You can also select to reserve a DOI without making the protocol public, so you can share privately this DOI with the potential peer reviewers of your paper if you are associating your protocol with a paper submission. Now I would like to move on to the third point in the agenda, which is a very specific partnership that we have established with 3 peer-reviewed journals, actually 4 peer-reviewed journals, which fits within the narrative of method renaissance, because the idea is to bring more credit and recognition to method development. And the idea is that your protocol, published and posted in protocols.io, can be submitted to BMC methods, Nature protocols, or Protocols 1 for peer review and eventual publication as a methodological paper. Because our partnership with PLOS ONE is the oldest, I will use this one as an example. So the result of this partnership between PLOS ONE and protocols.io is that PLOS ONE created a new article type called Lab Protocol. And this collaboration is about turning your protocol in protocols.io into a peer-reviewed paper. Now, just to clarify, if you're interested in getting a peer-reviewed publication by publishing your protocol in a journal, you don't necessarily have to submit to either of these three journals, PLOS ONE, BMC methods, or Nature protocols. There are many other journals that are specialized in publishing methods, techniques, and protocols. You know your field, you know your audience, and you know the appropriate journals. But PLOS ONE specifically is a pretty broad, welcoming journal. And the reason that we are excited about this partnership is that the way that they have defined the scope is that they are not expecting new experimental results, and they are welcoming to new protocols that might be extensions of something that has already been reported. But the idea is that if there is already an existing method and you have done optimization and troubleshooting to make the method work in a different condition or more optimally, that you can get credit for that work of optimization. So they are not expecting a brand new method. So the standard has been set in a way that they want to recognize valuable work. There has to be work, obviously. But the idea is to acknowledge the constant development involved in optimizing a method and not just brand new technologies. And the integration between any of these journals and protocols.io means that the protocol is the front and center of the paper. And now moving on to the last part of the talk about our partnership we have with many publishers. I would like to start by saying that although we are very familiar with supplementary files and documents in papers, there is a strong push for a number of years now to moving away from supplements by using repositories instead, embracing this idea of modular science communication. And what you see on the screen is a really good article in the magazine The Scientist about this movement. And the reason is that supplements are not discoverable independently of papers, and that these files are not machine readable either. And the hyperlinks to all journals can be lost. Therefore, the use of repositories increases discoverability, accessibility, and reuse of your methods and data. And what you see on the screen are just some examples of papers that are published, and the journals are promoting sharing of the detailed protocols in protocols.io. And this is, again, the kind of modular publishing that we have started seeing more and more, where the paper is a centerpiece, it is the story. But we have the data in NCBI, Open Science Framework, or other appropriate data repository. The code is in GitHub, and we are now starting to see more and more of methods also going to a repository. So we're seeing some trend in scholarly publishing, moving away from vague method sections to more rigorous, more reproducible method reporting. And as I mentioned before, a published protocol in protocols.io with an assigned DOI is a citable object that can be referenced to in a paper, giving credit to the author's methodological work. The reference will also be linked to the protocol in protocols.io, so the reader will have access to the interactive step-by-step protocol, even if the paper is published behind a paywall, because all of our content is open access. And I also want to highlight that doing a good job at reporting your methods should increase the impact of your papers, as the data that I'm showing you shows. What you see here is a study showing that as the career of scientists progresses, the scientists become more senior, they value more and more the method sections of the paper, because they understand that it is the methods that are fundamental to properly interpret the data and to reproduce the experiments. So to summarize, you can read in these slides some of the rewards and benefits of openly sharing your protocols and linking these to your research articles. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions. I see that there is already one hand raised. Karen, I don't know if you would like to type your question in the chat. So we have a question from Fred that says, methods often require custom software. Can that be included on the site, or does it have to be hosted elsewhere? So we don't host code ourselves, but we have in the editor, which is the tool to write the protocols, we have components that allow you to upload software or to hyperlink to GitHub, for example. However, just to clarify, the software cannot be run directly from the platform. You have to run it from elsewhere, but you can hyperlink or upload it so people can download it to their computer when running the protocol, yeah, and the software as well. Does that clarify your question, Fred? If not, let me know and I will give it another go. Karen, I enabled your microphone if you wish to talk, but you are muted. In the meantime, are there any other questions that you wish to type either in the chat or in the Q&A windows? I will stop the recording now in case somebody want. Oh, there's one question in the Q&A window. Let me have a look at it. The question says, different versions will have a different public link? Yes, every version receives its unique DOI, but in the platform, they sit on top of each other. So the reader also has the option to move to previous versions of the protocol. And if the paper, let's say, directs you to version 1, but there is already a version 2, the platform will let you know that newer versions also exist. And you can always compare two versions side by side. Did I answer your question, Young Chung? Any other question? So I will stop the recording now in case somebody would like to ask a question of the record.